Olá, olá, alunos. Olá, olá, hello, hello. Hello, hello, testando a voz aqui, tudo bem? Boa tarde, boa tarde. Tudo bem, pessoal? Pessoal. Tranquilo? Ué, cadê o pessoal daqui da live? Ok, pessoal. Eu tô vendo aqui as páginas que nós estamos. Ele está trabalhando com present tense, ou seja, present perfect. O uso do have e o verbo no particípio. Então, para quem não lembra, eu vou deixar aqui claro. Calma aí que eu vou ter que desligar o telão aqui, tá? Tá vendo? A gente está usando, estamos usando esses livros aqui. E o present tense, que é a primeira visão que nós temos do present tense. Ok, galera? Então, present tense, nós temos aqui what have you done. Eu sempre disse que a gente trabalha com lista de verbos irregulares. Eu já mandei para vocês, vou mandar de novo. Tá? Ela tá aqui, ó. Mandar no próprio grupo. certo? Foi para o grupo, lista de verbos irregulares, para a gente trabalhar o Present Perfect. Vou dar uma retomada aqui no Present Perfect, eu não sei se vocês, para dar uma recordada. Oi, Angela Ferraz. Calma que está abrindo aqui. Certo? Então a gente trabalha com Present Perfect, acho que vocês já sabem. Present Perfect. Trabalha com o Present Perfect, e o Present Perfect trabalha com duas vertentes aqui muito importantes, que na verdade o verbo auxiliar, que é o verbo ter, acho que vocês lembram, mais um verbo no particípio. Então ele trabalha sempre com esses dois pilares, o verbo have, que aqui no caso vem como verbo auxiliar, plus particípio. Certo? Esses são os dois pilares dele. Tá? É importante sempre focar que, como trabalha com o verbo auxiliar, que é o have, é importante ter essa conjugação dele de cabeça, que seria a tradução dele original. Aqui no caso teriam duas, né, porque são eles e elas também. Então, esse aqui seria o correto da conjugação, que é um Present Perfect, tempo verbal aceitável, então eles e elas têm. Essa é a conjugação de extrema importância do Present Perfect. Tá? Aqui no caso o have está vindo como verbo auxiliar, não como verbo principal. Ele como verbo principal teria a tradução de have na maioria das vezes. Tá? É isso. Esse é o verbo have. E ele vai vir sempre com o particípio, que eu vou até mudar de cor. Ó. Então o present perfect vai ser o have, que é um verbo auxiliar, plus um particípio. Entendeu? Olá, pessoal. Olá, pessoal. Tudo bem? Certo? Então vocês tinham o que? Vocês tinham os exercícios aqui do Present Perfect dessa primeira parte, que era o capítulo. Tá certo isso? 28. 28, né? Do 28 ao. Peraí. Isso, da página 28 em diante. Então vocês têm esse exercício aí do Present Perfect para mandar para mim uma foto desse exercício resolvido, baseado na explicação de que o Present Perfect aqui tem um verbo auxiliar que é o verbo have. Tá? Aí, ó. E o particípio, na verdade, vocês vão precisar sempre se guiar pela listinha de verbos irregulares, que é essa que está aqui dentro. Ó, vou abrir ela. Mandei ela para o grupo, mas é sempre bom seguir, observar ela. Observações importantes a serem feitas antes de iniciar qualquer exercício de Present Perfect. Número 1. Ele tem um passado e um particípio diferente, mas que muitas vezes aqui na tabela é igual. Ok? E o número 2 e o número 3 são as formas que são conjugados esses verbos. Uma outra observação importante é saber se o verbo que está aqui no particípio ele é regular, com R de rato, ou irregular, com I de igreja, que aí seria no caso este. Vou colocar walk. Walk é caminhar. E é um verbo regular, ou seja, ele não está na listinha aqui de verbos irregulares. Isso significa que ele não tem passado, tá? Que aqui todo verbo tem um passado distinto. Ele não tem passado. E eu preciso, além do passado, eu preciso de um particípio. O que eu posso fazer? Eu posso simplesmente acrescentar ed ao verbo, porque ele não tem, tá? Ele não tem esse particípio, tá? Essa é a regra. Calma que eu vou já jogar um.
Hello class, welcome to this video where I will explain how the present perfect tense works. When is it used? It's used when the action has not yet finished. It's still going on, or there's some results that are still going on. For example, I have played piano for 2 years. I have played means I started playing, but it's still going on. I still play the piano. This is why I have to use the present perfect tense, because it still has something to do with the present, even though I started it in the past. How is it formed? It's formed by have or has plus the participle. This means, in an example, I have waited. Waited is a participle. Or you have played. He has written. She has eaten. It has rained.
Estou reproduzindo.
We have practiced. You have cooked, and they have visited. How does the question work? They have done their homework. If it's a question, you have to invert. Instead of they have they done their homework? The negative, they have done their homework. They have not done their homework. You have to use the helping word not together with have or has. Situation with the word for. They have lived in Austria for 10 years. This is a time period. For 10 years, it's long. Situation with for, example, 4 years, 2 months, for a week, for 2 minutes. What about the word since? They have not eaten since this morning. This is a point in time. It's not a long time period. It's a point in time, since this morning. For example, since Christmas, since 2015, since I was 7, or since I was a baby. I hope you have understood how the present perfect tense works. Bye now.
Ok? Esse é o present perfect. Vocês têm um exercício para fazer, que é este aqui. Certo? Alguma dúvida? Ok, pessoal, exercício este. Alguma dúvida, pessoal? Pessoal, oi. Tá? Esse é o Present Perfect. Na verdade, eu vou até fazer uma... Calma aí.
One at a time. Group.
Manda ver.
Oi? Oi? Desmuta aqui, por favor. É que eu... Obrigada.
Today. I did so many things today.
Certo, pessoal? Mais 2 minutinhos, só para concluir esse cara. Ângela, por enquanto não. Tranquilo? Beleza. Ângela Fraz. São só Present Perfect, na verdade. Não tem muita coisa, ó. Que é o primeiro aqui, Present Perfect. Né? Os exemplos, ó. Para completar com afirmativa e negativa. Isso aqui é para praticar em grupo, então a gente não tem esse aqui, tá? Esse aqui já está fora de questão. Make question and answer then. Where she to go to? She to go to Peru. Aqui é para formular a pergunta. Esse aqui é o exercício mais interessante, ó. Capítulo 2, página 30. Vocês vão criar a pergunta e a resposta no presente simples, utilizando as regras que aqui não tem, que no enunciado, na frase, que é o verbo auxiliar, que são os verbos auxiliares, e um verbo vai para o particípio. Aqui, se formular a frase, já mostra um certo domínio pela matéria. Ué, cadê o presente perfeito?
I've done it. The present perfect. The exact time is not important. I've done it. I graduated last month. My friend has broken his leg. He broke it 2 days ago. I've seen a great movie. It was Romeo and Juliet. I've done so many things today. I did so many things today. He hasn't finished cleaning his room. He finished cleaning his room. He's just seen a ghost. I've already told you. I haven't talked to my date yet. Have you ever been to Tokyo? No, I've never been there. Where is Amy? She's gone to New York. How long have they lived in Miami? They've lived there for 5 months. How long have they lived in Miami? They've lived there since March. Have you been to a jazz club this week? No, I haven't been to one. Has she called her friends lately? Yes, she's called twice this week. Have they eaten dinner yet? No, they haven't eaten yet. She's been promoted recently. I've done laundry 3 times this week.
Certo? Então esses aí são os exercícios. Cadê vocês? Até do 28 ao 30. Na verdade 28 e 30 porque o 29 não tem. Sim. É o exercício principal. Porque você tem perguntas e respostas, então ele acaba sendo o principal. Certo, pessoal? Quando vocês terminarem esse aqui, eu vou mostrar para vocês um vídeo que é um teste de proficiência em uma universidade, chama-se IELTS. Eu gosto bastante desse.
Oi, te mandei e-mail, mas você ainda não me respondeu.
Certo, pessoal? Vocês vão ver um vídeo de um teste de proficiência em uma escola. Chama IELTS. É um teste de proficiência internacional. Muito bom. Vou fazer perguntas sobre esse teste.
Okay, so let's start off by talking about your work. Do you work or do you study?
Well, I'm currently working. I finished my studies 2 years ago, so I'm currently working as a pharmacist.
And where do you currently work?
I currently work in Dublin. I came in Dublin a few months ago. I worked previously in Romania from where I am.
And why did you choose that career?
Well, I think my mother has some influences on me. So she's an assistant, and she always thought that pharmacy will suit me, and it's an easy job and a respected job. So she kind of pushed me to do pharmacy. So I chose pharmacy in the end.
And do you enjoy your job?
I do now. Like when I was in Romania, I didn't like it that much, but now in Ireland the system is different and I feel more appreciated for my work, so it starts to grow on me.
Good. So now let's talk about your hometown. Okay. So where are you from?
I am from a small town in Romania, so I grew up in a really small town and then I moved to a larger city near to my town, and it's called Negrești. So it's difficult for foreigners to pronounce it.
And do you like your hometown?
I didn't like it when I was a child. I like it now because it's a small town, a small community where you can raise your children with no problems, with no bad influences. So it's a good place where you can grow up and be a decent person.
Good. And how often do you visit your hometown?
Now that I'm living in Ireland, probably I will visit it. I will visit once or twice a year. But when I lived in the other city in Iași, I went to Negrești maybe twice a month.
And how do you think your hometown could be improved?
Well, because it's a small community, maybe just improve the job offers, try to raise the local economy. Most of the people that are living there are farmers or they are working in construction, so maybe just improve that part and they can live better.
Now let's talk about your childhood. Did you have a nice childhood?
Yes, I did. Like I said, it was a small community, so my parents knew every neighbors that we had. They weren't afraid to leave me with kids on the street just to play or let me out in the night going with my friends to have some fun. So it was nice.
What is your first memory?
My first memory is a funny one. I was 2 years and a half and I ran from my grandparents' house to go to kindergarten where my aunt was going, so I missed her so much that I ran out of the house and come back with her a few hours later.
And when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always loved medicine, pharmacy, science in general, so I knew I would be a biology teacher, a doctor, a pharmacist, something that related with the science part.
And what hobbies did you have
As
when
a
you were
child? Well, I tried a lot of hobbies. I tried singing, I tried sports, I did actually karate. I did a lot of them, but I never found one that it suits me 100%. So I don't think I have a hobby.
Okay, good. All right, that's the end of part 1. We're going to move on to part 2 now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a cue card with a topic on it. You should read that cue card and you will have 1 minute to prepare an answer. After that 1 minute, I'll let you know when the 1 minute is up and you should speak about the topic on the cue card for up to 2 minutes. Okay. Is that okay? All right. There's the cue card. I'll start the stopwatch. Okay, please speak for up to 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about my first computer that I got when I was like 8 or 10 years old. Back then we didn't have an internet connection, so it was pretty easy to use it, especially for a kid that did some computer science in school. So basically I used it only for basic games that I already had pre-installed on my system, listen to music, movies that I borrowed from my friends. It wasn't hard for me to learn computer science on that one because with the develop of the technology, we got also a computer, internet connection in our house. So practically, I started to grow up in the same time with the technology. So now the main benefits that I'm getting from that are me knowing to use and discover more utilities of the computer, new programs. I can manage to solve my own problems with the computer, hardware or software. I also don't have any difficulties when it comes to work, to solve a problem with my system at work. Also, I think because we, as a generation, grew up with a computer in our houses, we got a lot of advantages of this, because nowadays everyone is depending on a smart device or a computer, so that helped a lot. And I even start, okay.
So that's the end of part 2, and we're going to move on to part 3 now. All right. So we've been talking about technology, and we're going to continue to talk about technology for a little bit. And we're going to talk about technology as it relates to education. So the first question is, do you think someone can learn a language using an online course?
Yeah, I just did that. It's not like I've learned a language, a new language, but an online course can help as much as face-to-face teacher can help you. If it's a good course and it has enough explanation on it, they can help you a lot to get the information that you're missing. So for example, if we are speaking about a vocabulary course for a beginner, a good course will provide the learner the basic words, the basic grammar, and everything that they have to know in the beginning of learning that language.
Mm-hmm. And should schools use more technology in the classroom?
Well, I think so, because children nowadays use their smart mobiles and smart devices all the time, so they are very familiar with technology, and schools should really improve their classrooms. I don't know about Ireland in general, but in Romania we didn't have computers in our classrooms. We had only one room with computers, and the rest were all old books. So every new information that we got, it came from books and not an actual technology piece. Or I don't know, let's say we are studying biology. It's easier to study something that you can see 3D, like with holograms, than seeing a book.
And do you think one day AI, artificial intelligence, will replace teachers in the classroom?
No, I don't think that, because a teacher can come with some experience in the back, can come with more than artificial intelligence can bring. Like, it's a personal experience that a student can correlate with the lesson and remember that particular story from the teacher's experience and correlate it with what he learned. So I don't think a computer could do that. Even though it's programmed to be like an artificial intelligence, I don't think it will accomplish that.
Now let's talk about technology and society. So has technology improved how we communicate with each other?
It has. If we are speaking about smartphones, for example, now we can not only can call each other, we can text in a few seconds, we can video call, we can use the internet connection to see each other from big distances, like I am with my family. The smart device that I'm using is helping me a lot keeping in touch with them.
And why are some people now reducing the amount of time they spend on electronic devices?
I think at some point we got overwhelmed by the technology around us, and now people are trying to realize that the social connection that are between people are starting to fade. So they are trying to restart a real connection between people and give up a little bit of social internet and actually doing some socialization.
Okay, good. Well done. That's it over. You can breathe now. You can relax. And you ended up with socialization at the end. So very good. So now I'm going to give you some advice. And I'm basing this advice on the fact that you've done the test 3 times now. You got a band 6 the first time in speaking,
7.
then you got 7,
Then
and then
8.
you got 8 in speaking
Yeah.
before. Okay, so you're continually improving. And what we want to do with you is to make sure that next time you do the test that you absolutely 100% are going to get at least the score that you need. Because as a pharmacist, you need a band 7.
Yeah.
What you're struggling a little bit with writing at the minute, but sometimes students will focus so much on writing, and let's say they're at a band 7 for speaking, and they'll focus so much on writing that they forget or they just are a little bit complacent when it comes to speaking. So what the advice I'm going to give you now is to make sure that you would never fall below a 7, and to make sure that you get there. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go through each part, and then I'm going to go through the 4 marking criteria.
Yep.
So you did something in part 1, which is very, very common, where you were a little bit nervous in the beginning.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about work, you were a little bit more hesitant, shorter answers, and that is totally normal. And most examiners will expect that, because part 1 is important, but it is designed to let you ease into the test and to let you warm up. So that's why they ask you questions about work, about your hometown, about your home, which are quite easy questions to try and get you warmed up. And as you went through, when you were talking about your hometown and more when you were talking about your childhood, you were talking far more fluently, you were developing your answers. It was, more relaxed. So when you're talking about work, it was like, not robotic, but when you're talking about hometown and childhood, it's like talking to a friend about. So if you and I were in a coffee shop and I was saying, what did you have a nice childhood? You're like, yeah, I did, and just talking naturally, and that was great to see. So part 1 was really good. The examiners would never listen to your first few answers that were a little bit, let's say they were a little bit short, fluency a little bit hesitant. They would never base their score on those first few answers. So some people watching now would be like, oh, she gave 1 short answer, she gets a band 6. Like, that's not how the examiners think or how the marking criteria thinks. The examiner will base their score on the totality, your total performance, not on 1 short answer or 1 answer where you hesitated, for example. So for part 1, the length was good, you really eased into it, your fluency was excellent, some nice vocabulary in there, some grammatical errors, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the 4 marking criteria. Part 2, I think part 2 was the area that you struggled with a little bit compared to the other parts, because there was a lot of pausing, a lot of hesitation. So your fluency wasn't as good in part 2 as it was in part 1 and part 3. I'll tell you why I think, but it's always good to hear from the student. Why did you think that you were struggling, or didn't do a bad job, by the way. It's just in comparison to the other parts, there was more audible pauses and like
Yeah, I've noticed that myself. Maybe because I forgot about some ideas that I had in my head, and I tried to see if I got all those dots on the card. I know I don't have to speak about all of them, they are just guidelines, but I don't know, at some point I felt stuck and didn't know what to say. So maybe that's why with the long pauses.
So the audible pauses are normally caused by one of 2 things. one is linguistic, or related to grammar, related to vocabulary. So you're trying to think of the correct word, for example. The other one is related to ideas, people trying to think of content, basically, things to say. Was it linguistic? Were you trying to think of the correct vocabulary and grammar, or was it just ideas? Ideas, yeah. So the examiner will also notice that, because if you are constantly stopping because you're trying to think of the correct verb tense or trying to think of the correct vocabulary, that's a signal to the examiner that you have a problem with the English language. If you're just pausing because you're just trying to think of the next thing to say, that's not really a problem with the English language, it's more of a problem with the subject. So the examiner should take that into account. But one of the things that I noticed that you did, which normally causes a drop in fluency related to content, is you listed a lot of things. So you're like, so for example, it could be, I went to the shop and I got bananas and apple and cheese and cereal, and they're trying to think of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's much easier just to pick one of those things. So you're talking about software versus hardware, and go a little bit deeper into that and tell like a story related to that or example related to that. Because I think a lot of people go through part 2 and they're just like, okay, I need to talk about this. Let's list a lot of things about that. Then this, list a lot of things, and then you run out of time or run out of things to say. So I think when you're doing the real test, don't be afraid to go very deep into one thing, and especially pick one thing that you're comfortable talking about. Like, for example, I got, when I was a little girl, I got Windows 2000 or something like that, and how the changes that it made were blah, 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 blah. And I really learned a lot about programming through that. So that's much better than we had Windows and we had Adobe and we had this and we had this and we had this. You see what I mean? That just makes it easier for you to be more fluent. And so I think that's the only, in terms of fluency and coherence, that's the only area of concern that I would have. You weren't, like, your fluency wasn't terrible, but we're just making sure that you would never go below a 7. And if you, that topic sounds like something you know a lot about, but if you got another topic that you don't like, that could turn into a problem for you. And it's part 2 is such a big part of the test that if you get a topic you aren't comfortable with, plus you're trying to think of content, that can really drag down your fluency scores. So that would be my main bit of advice, to go deep on a few things you feel comfortable talking about, rather than trying to list everything. And examples and stories are great. Like the story you told about when you were a little girl running after your auntie, you were very, very, very fluent because you're just talking naturally. It's much easier to talk about something you know about than to try and think of something completely abstract and to list lots of things. But overall, I thought it was good because you got to the 2 minutes. No, most people don't get to the 2 minutes, and speaking in a foreign language for 2 minutes is not easy. For part 3, I think you did really, really well. For part 3, you had no problems with any of the questions, and a lot of the questions, like for example, will AI replace teachers? Why are some people reducing their time on their electronic? Those are difficult questions. And the examiners will, if they think that you are, a 7 or a band 8 or a band 9, they'll ask you more and more difficult questions to see if they can stretch you and really test you. So if you get difficult questions, that's a good thing. Be happy. If they ask you really simple questions, like then you might have a problem. But you coped very, very well with those questions. I like the way that you answered the questions, gave an explanation, gave an example to help you fully answer, fully develop the question. So part 3, you finished very, very strongly. And in the test, don't be afraid to keep going in part 3, or you should keep going in part 3. Because people often feel tired and they just want it to be over, so they give very short answers for part 3. Often people do that subconsciously as well, because they're just like, oh, I'm sick of this. But you did you did a really good job on development. Development is the most important thing, I think. Apart from the 4 marking criteria, development in part 3 is the most important thing, and you did a good job with that. So well done. Let's talk about 4 marking criteria. Your strongest area is pronunciation. Like many Romanian students, the clarity of what you're saying is very, very good. I can understand 100% of what you're saying. Any IELTS examiner would be able to understand 100% of what you're saying. So that means that you would be getting at least a band 7 for pronunciation. Plus you have very good use of intonation, sentence stress, word stress, connected speech, all these higher level pronunciation features. You have a very good command of those, which means you would get more than a 7 for pronunciation. So when you combine the examiner can understand everything, plus you're using those higher level pronunciation features. So that's probably why you got a band 8 the last time, because you can't get a band 8 without using the higher level pronunciation features. For fluency and coherence, your coherence is very good because you answered every question properly. You stuck to answering the question rather than going off topic, and you fully developed your question. So for part 1, you don't need to give very, very long answers. You gave a few answers that were quite short at the beginning, but the rest were fine. Part 2, you talked for 2 minutes, so that was fine. And part 3, you fully developed your answers by answering the question, explaining, giving examples, so that was good to see. Fluency was very good in part 1, quite good in part 3, dropped a little bit in part 2, but we've already talked about how to get around that, and I would encourage you to don't be complacent about speaking and maybe practice part 2, because part 2 seems to be the area that you need to, the only area that you really need to worry about.
Subject.
Yeah.
It depends on the subject, so maybe I should do more subjects with various teams.
Yeah.
And have an answer about and some ideas.
It's, you know, a pint of sweat is better than a drop of tears. You know, you want to do the hard work during your preparation. Make it as difficult as possible, so the test day is a breeze and it's no big deal for you. So that would be my only concern with your fluency is very good. It's at least a band 7 level, but you know, as I said before, if you got a topic that you know nothing about, and they're going to ask you about the same topic in general in part 3, so it's like, you know, you said before you got they're asking you about history and you don't know anything about it, or you don't know very little about history, so that could cause fluency problems because you don't have a problem with the language, but you might have a problem with the content. So you're trying to think of those things. But in general, it's rare. I don't think you would ever get a topic that you know nothing about. Like history is something that you know a little bit about. You know what the First World War was, or the Second World War, and you know. So they're not testing your knowledge of the Second World War or the First World War. They're talking about whether you can talk about a range of topics. Your vocabulary is quite good. You have a really nice range of vocabulary. I asked you about many different topics. You have no problem talking about all of those topics. So that, because I was asking about a range of topics and you have topic-specific vocabulary related to all of those, you have that would indicate that you have a very wide-ranging vocabulary. Because if you ask someone about 5 or 6 different topics and they have topic-specific vocabulary about all of those, that means that you could talk about pretty much any general topic. So that was very, very good. Collocations are something that I would work on for you. When you're listening to English and reading English, notice collocations, underline them, put them in a book. Try and practice them, review them, and use them. Collocations is one of the areas that tells an examiner the difference between somebody at a band 6, band 7 level and a band 8, band 9 level. Because if you listen to native English speakers, they will use collocations just intuitively without even thinking about it. Whereas someone at a band 6, band 7 level will know the words. They might have a very wide-ranging vocabulary, but they might not be able to put those words together, which is make little mistakes with that. I'm not too worried about your vocabulary though. I'd just be careful with collocations, but in the test, don't be thinking collocations, because that will affect your fluency. Because there's a balance between fluency and vocabulary and grammar. The more you think about vocabulary and grammar, normally the lower your fluency. But just be confident that I think your vocabulary is good enough to get a band 7 at least. The one area that I would be concerned about is small grammatical errors. You seem to have two things. One would be you seem to be translating sometimes, so that's probably because of the way I would guess that you learned English through translation rather than learning it through communication. The other problem is little fossilized errors. Fossilized errors are errors that you make and you've no idea that you're making them. So common fossilized errors are things like articles and prepositions. They don't affect, you didn't make article mistakes by the way, but you made some preposition mistakes. They don't affect communication. So if you're in Dublin and you're in a bar and you're talking to your boyfriend, he won't correct you if you say of instead of in, you know, as a preposition, because he understands exactly what you're saying. But so that means that you never pick up on the mistake that you're making, and you make it again and again and again and again, and it becomes hardwired, natural into your brain. A good way of getting around that is to record yourself and listen to. So I think the best advice that I could give you would be get part 2 questions, look at them, prepare them for 1 minute, record on your phone, and then listen back. Because that's going to help your fluency, it's going to help part 2, but it will also help you pick up on these little grammatical errors that you're making. You're not making any serious grammatical errors, and you're not making them like every single sentence, because if you were, there's no way that you would have got a band 7 and a band 8 the last 2 times that you did it. And I'm not really concerned that you'll get a band 6 or a band 6.5, but we want to make absolutely 100% sure. These little errors that you're making with grammar are also present in your writing. So I think working on them is going to help both your speaking and your writing. So we want to make your preparation as efficient as possible. So I think doing that in combination with the reading and the listening and the writing that we suggested for you is going to really help you out. Any questions about the speaking test, or any questions about the advice that I gave you?
Not now, but I will think about it.
I think you should be really confident, and if you take those steps, I think you'll get at least a band 7, if not repeat the band 8 that you got last time. So well done.
That's good to hear.
All right, good.
Certo, pessoal, isso aqui é o seguinte, isso aqui é um teste de proficiência do IELTS, tá vendo? IETL, IELTS. IELTS é um teste de proficiência para quem já é fluente, mas eu acho que o IELTS dos 4, são 4, ele é o mais tranquilo, assim, de teste de proficiência. Se vocês observaram nesse diálogo, o conteúdo utilizado por ele não passou do que vocês têm no livro aqui, do student, desse material, que ele nem passou pelo passado perfeito, para vocês terem uma ideia. Né? Foi um diálogo tranquilo, explicando algumas coisas no passado, né? Empregando algumas situações com o present perfect, que é super importante, que é o que vocês estão fazendo exatamente aqui. Cadê? Aqui, ó. Tá? Esse é o conteúdo que vocês estão fazendo. É exatamente, basicamente a mesma ideia de passado simples e present perfect sendo utilizado aí, né, no diálogo um pouco mais longo do que o normal. Acho que talvez vocês nunca tiveram, nunca ouviram algo tão longo, mas assim, um diálogo tão longo. Mas é um diálogo que utiliza dessa gramática que vocês viram nesses livros que vocês pegaram. Eu acho interessante focar um pouco nos diálogos como esse. Enfim, nesse teste de proficiência, ele dá algumas dicas para ela, né, faz algumas críticas, que na verdade nem chegam a ser críticas, né, na verdade são mais toques. E, bom, eu gostaria de saber se, assim, né, se vocês entenderam o áudio, não entenderam nada, qual que foi a correlação com o áudio. Áudio-vídeo, na verdade, que é um áudio-vídeo, né? Só curiosidade, vocês conseguiram entender esse vídeo? Pelo menos alguma parte do diálogo, alguma coisa que foi dita? Né? Fazendo muita menção aí aos tempos verbais que foram usados nesse diálogo aí, desde o início, desde o começo, né? Vamos voltar aqui. Que principalmente esse camarada aqui, ó, Present Perfect, sendo sempre utilizado, tá? Eu sempre deixo uma observação muito clara aqui em relação aos passados, porque, por exemplo, isso aqui é um passado regular, né? Um verbo regular, um verbo passado regular, um verbo regular está dentro do passado simples, que é com ed. Se eu for utilizar ele no Present Perfect, né, no caso do particípio que não existe no verbo regular, ele também vai vir com ed. Justamente porque o verbo regular, ele não tem uma forma no passado, e por isso nós acrescentamos ed. São os detalhes que fazem a grande diferença. Observações importantes são as formas que são feitas as frases interrogativas e as frases negativas. As frases interrogativas eu vou utilizar esse mesmo verbo, walked, you, né? You have walked. Tá vendo? Deixa eu só arrumar esse you aqui. You have walked. Ó, você caminhou with me. Você caminhou comigo. You have walked with me. Ó, você vê que aqui, como ele não tem um particípio, ele vem automaticamente na forma dele no passado. Ó, tá? Usei aqui o verbo auxiliar, o clássico, né, verbo auxiliar. E junto dele eu já passei o verbo principal para o passado, aqui no caso seria um particípio. Mas ele não tem particípio. Ele não tem nem passado. Então nós adaptamos aqui um ed para que a frase ficasse no passado. Agora vamos pensar na frase negativa desse mesmo camarada. Ó, eu venho aqui, eu preciso negar alguma coisa. Como o verbo auxiliar está presente, então será ele. Eu vou fazer isso, ó, nem vou abreviar. Ele foi negado, então a frase já está. You haven't walked, or have not walked with me. Tá vendo? Que fique claro isso, que o have está sendo negado aqui. Se for fazer uma frase interrogativa, começaria obviamente com o próprio have. Have you walked with me? Interrogação. Então o uso do have é muito importante. Certo? Isso forma o passado, o presente perfeito. Outra observação importante é que quando ele faz as perguntas para ela, né, essas perguntas do vídeo surgirão em um outro momento, mas quando ele faz perguntas para ela em relação a onde ela morou, o que ela trabalhou, onde ela estudou, aí que está a grande sacada do diálogo. O uso do presente perfeito para indicar que algo que aconteceu lá no passado influenciou muito hoje, por exemplo, né? Uma coisa que tem que ser observada, eu não sei se vocês ouviram, prestaram bastante atenção nos diálogos, ele pergunta de onde ela veio, onde ela nasceu, etc. Ela conta, né, que foi um lugar pequeno, etc. Ela vai contar o lugar lá, é X. Ele pergunta se ela gosta do lugar. Ela diz que costumava não gostar, mas que hoje gosta. Nessa transição entre que ela conta para ele a história do lugar, ela acaba tendo que usar o present perfect para explicar para ele que existe uma referência, né? Por exemplo, o lance da profissão também, né? A influência da mãe e tal. Então, existe o present perfect ali acontecendo, né? Porque na verdade ele é praticamente inevitável. Embora não tenha nada parecido dentro do português, no inglês ele é uma ferramenta fundamental para linkar esse tempo, né? Algo que acontece lá, mas que influencia hoje, que de alguma forma vive hoje, né? Ou seja, desde então ele nunca morreu. Aquela ação trouxe uma consequência aqui e que mudaram as coisas, né? E ele vai estar presente em diversas formas de diálogo. No caso da entrevista, o foco é sempre esse, né? Ver como é que ela interage com esse tempo verbal. Isso é interessante, né? Outra observação importante aqui, eu já disse como é que funciona o Present Perfect, que é o assunto principal nesse livro, é o uso do ED com palavras que terminam com Y. Por exemplo, play, já falei sobre isso, e study. Tá? Essas duas palavras aqui, coincidentemente, terminam com Y. Ó. Tá? Mas o diferencial é o que vem anterior a ele, né? Porque antes do Y nós temos as peculiaridades. Aqui uma vogal e aqui uma consoante, né? Os dois são verbos regulares. Ou seja, eles não estão dentro da lista de verbos irregulares, que é essa nossa listinha aqui, ó. Eles não estão presentes nesse quadro, né? Se eles estivessem presentes, obviamente nós teríamos o passado dele aqui. E um particípio que não é o caso, porque o present perfect formaria o particípio aqui. Lá não tem nenhum deles. Quando isso acontece, nós acrescentamos ED. A observação importante aqui é o seguinte: embora ambos sejam verbos regulares e ambos tenham o passado indicado pelo acréscimo do ED, algo entre os dois vai diferir e vai ser muito intenso. Por exemplo, se antes do Y, tá vendo? Eu tiver uma vogal, esse passado não vai mudar muita coisa. Tá vendo? Eu simplesmente acrescentei ED. Diferente deste caso, que antes do Y eu tenho uma consoante. E quando isso acontece, eu substituo o Y por I. E aí sim eu acrescento o ED. Deixando claro que esses dois verbos, eles são verbos regulares com R de rato. Eles não estão presentes na lista de verbos irregulares, tirando assim qualquer possibilidade de omitir esse ED. É obrigado a colocá-lo. A peculiaridade aqui está no Y. Em um caso, ele se mantém. No outro, ele é substituído. Ó. Certo? Sendo assim, uma frase no Present Perfect com ambos, tanto com play quanto study, teria essa forma. I have studied. I have played. Então, essa seria a nossa forma. Play, study. Tá? Seguindo a regra aqui das frases interrogativas e negativas, eu acho que até esse exercício que está aqui sendo proposto no livro fica até mais fácil. Make question and answer them. Monte as frases, né, as frases interrogativas, e responda a elas. Sendo que você já tem a frase aqui interrogativa, né? Obviamente que são todas no Present Perfect, tá vendo? Que pede um verbo auxiliar, e aqui ED ou particípio, se for o caso. Logo, Você tem aqui as frases montadas, mas faltando, né, tanto o particípio quanto o verbo auxiliar, e a resposta dela também sem o particípio e sem o verbo auxiliar. Então a primeira coisa a ser feita aqui é primeiro colocar o verbo auxiliar. É por isso que é tão importante saber conjugar esse verbo auxiliar. Aqui nós temos a tabela dele, ó, do have, has. I have, you have, he has, she has, it has, we have, they have. Então nós temos aqui a tabela dos verbos auxiliares, que aqui nesse caso eu coloquei ele como verbo principal, já com a tradução, para que ficasse claro como ele é conjugado. Só que no presente perfeito ele é apenas um verbo auxiliar, né, para dar característica do tempo, do presente perfeito. Mas um particípio que seria, no caso do verbo irregular, a terceira coluna. E no caso do verbo regular, ele vai ser representado pelo acréscimo do ed. E assim nós formamos o presente perfeito. Ok? E esse é o exercício. Esse é o exercício... Opa! Alguma dúvida em relação ao exercício 30? Eu vou até perguntar aqui, né? Ninguém respondeu se conseguiu entender o vídeo ou não. Acho que não. Alguma dúvida? Pessoal... Por enquanto não, tranquilo. Então, Viviane, Ângela e Nico. Então, vocês não estão com dúvida, mas a pergunta, presta atenção, é o seguinte. Esse vídeo aí que eu passei, que é um teste internacional, na verdade é o mais tranquilo que existe. Eu não sei, deixa eu ver, vamos ver lá. Entender o vídeo, alguma coisa? Então isso foi ótimo. Ótimo. Este é o segredo, né? O segredo. Ouvir apenas as palavras. Então, quanto mais na verdade, esse é o segredo, né? A armazenar o maior número de palavras possíveis dentro de um diálogo. Sempre que começar a estudar uma língua diferente, o segredo é sempre observar bem, né? E tentar ouvir o maior número de palavras e guardar esse grande número de palavras, o maior número que possível. Por quê? Porque o nosso cérebro, né, precisa de recursos para poder entender o que foi dito. E os recursos são nada mais, nada menos do que a quantidade de palavras que nós absorvemos de um diálogo. Então, assim, sendo assim, se prestar bastante atenção nos áudios e focar principalmente, na verdade, unicamente nas palavras que fazem sentido, que a gente sabe, focar nelas e tal, no final de tudo, o diálogo se torna bem possível para nós, sabe? É possível entender tranquilamente. Isso foi bom. Bom, basicamente essa unidade, esse livro é presente perfeito. Não tem nada mais simples do que isso. Tudo bem? Vamos para a próxima. Que só vai vir vocabulário mesmo, ó. Foi o livro 4 que eu usei. E os verbos em vigor aqui. Verbos e expressões, na verdade. Aqui nós temos um paradoxo, porque quando falamos em verbos e expressões, o que vai vir de cara aqui são phrasal verbs. Quer ver? Ó, 10 expressões. 10 expressões. Vamos ver se
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a new English bit. In today,
não é isso aqui não. 10 barcos. Na verdade são phrasal verbs. Meu Deus. Uhum.
10 English phrasal verbs about socializing from espressoenglish.net. Number 1.
Eu vou explicar aqui. Acho que eu passei o phrasal verbs. Eu nem sei se vocês chegaram a ver phrasal verbs. Peraí. Deixa eu dar uma olhada aqui. Isso aqui está, olha. Vocabulary. Direto com esse. Tá? E o último exercício aqui é o 31 ou 32, 32, que é see and learn, make questions, then give affirmative and negative answers. A mesma coisa que vocês fizeram aqui no outro, ó. Tá? É uma continuação. Então vou dar mais um tempinho para terminar esse daí. bem sim. Que bom. No segundo exercício tem duas pessoas que eu coloco what, has, very. Não, duas pessoas é have. Have. Sempre. Sim. Have. Sempre. Que for plural. Se eu coloquei dois for. Sempre que for plural. Você viu que eu repeti? Ó, deixa eu colocar de novo aqui. Não, sempre que for plural. Aí fica... I've been mistreated. Cause I know I've been mistreated. É isso aí, pessoal. Vou encerrar essa live. Espero que vocês tenham entendido aí, né? É isso aí. Muito obrigado pela participação. Fiquem todos com Deus aí. Tenham um ótimo final de semana. Abraço e que Deus abençoe.